Okay, very good. Welcome, everyone. This is the 104th meeting of the International Peace Coalition. My name is Dennis Small. I'm one of the co-moderators of the IPC meetings, along with Dennis Speed and our moderator, Anastasia Battle. And we would like to welcome you most especially to this 104th meeting of the IPC. Now, 104 is 52 times 2. This is our second year of nonstop, uninterrupted weekly meetings. But it needs to be so, given that the objectives that we established for ourselves was just to actually build a peace movement that could not only make a good college try, but actually succeed in bringing about a change in the global paradigm to ensure a durable peace. That task is not finished. It is not completed. We had a very successful conference over the course of last weekend, which was coincident with our 103rd meeting. The conference was of the Schiller Institute, and it was under the heading of A Beautiful Vision for Humanity in Times of Turbulence. And it was both a beautiful vision, and these are indeed times of turbulence. I would like to welcome you all and pass the microphone over, give the floor over to Helga Zepp-LaRouche, who is the founder of the Schiller Institute, the initiator of the IPC meetings, and the lead presenter on these weekly meetings to provide us with a strategic overview. So Helga, please go ahead.
Let me say hello to all of you first. Unfortunately, I cannot report relief in the strategic situation, even so different fronts are developing in different directions and with different speeds. Now, on the strategic situation between the United States and Russia, not all is lost, even so it looked like that for a certain amount of days or maybe hours, because, due to a very ominous, still ominous circumstance, President Trump at a certain point used a very undiplomatic language in respect to President Putin, to say the least. And he also made a very angry comment at an airport in a review, in a discussion with a reporter who asked him if he was aware of the drone attack on the helicopter of President Putin. And amazingly, he said he was not aware of it. Now, in the meantime, there can be no mistake. There was such an attack, even so the exact nature remains to be still clarified, but there was definitely a drone attack on the helicopter of President Putin. It's not clear if Putin was even inside this helicopter or not, but obviously this is a very serious event if a potential assassination attempt against the president of the strongest nuclear power is being made, and that the president of the other nuclear power wouldn't be informed about it. So I think that's still a big question mark, and maybe Graham Fuller will have some insights on that, or maybe not, I don't know. In any case, that led to an insight into the, in a certain sense, the patience of President Putin has been obviously quite substantial, but it is not so clear that the patience of all the military people around him and some others is equally long. And there were several reports that the mood in Russia is shifting, where, because of the continuous games coming from various people in the West, that they are more and more determined that, they cannot give up on the so-called core interests. Now, there are some hopeful signs about the next meeting between Russia and Ukraine in Istanbul on the 2nd of June, that's early next week, where it is clear what the core interests of Russia are. No membership of Ukraine in NATO, no offensive weapons inside the territory of Ukraine, obviously new borders given the changed situation in the last 3 years. And so it's not yet clear what the Ukrainian memorandum will be, but if everything goes well, they will meet on the 2nd of June in Istanbul and exchanging and aligning their memorandums, hopefully towards a solution. Now, unfortunately, that's not the only development. And there is one development which is extremely worrisome, and that is the fact that the new chancellor in Germany, Friedrich Merz, who in the past had come out saying that he wants the Taurus missile be deployed to the Ukrainians, that this missile could hit the Kerch Bridge leading to Crimea, that it could reach other targets. In the meantime, because the Social Democracy, which is his coalition partner, has restated their intent that that should not be happening. So, Merz has been more, unclear, saying that in any case, news will not be made public anymore about any weapon deliveries. But it is also, he also said that the Ukrainians needed to be trained right now on these missiles, which takes about 5 to 6 weeks. There are unconfirmed rumors that the Taurus may have been delivered already. And yesterday, President Zelenskyy was in Berlin meeting with Merz, after which it was not only announced that Germany will give another 5 billion to Ukraine, but that they announced that they are planning to do a Ukrainian-German production in Ukraine to produce long-range missiles. So this is all read in Russia with great concern, and there are senior Russian officials who have said that Russia is ready to take countermeasures. So we are looking potentially in a week's time distance at a scenario where any such deployment could take place. And there were already discussions in the Russian TV in the program called 60 Minutes, saying that if this happens, then a Russian countermeasure could be the deployment of the Oreshnik missile, which you remember is a super hypersonic missile, I think 10 Mach speed, against which there is no defense whatsoever. And they could deploy such Oreshniks to take out, for example, only for example, the factory in which the Taurus missile is being produced in a small city called Schrobenhausen, which is about 40 kilometers away from Munich, where, obviously, this would be a very, very strong signal. But if something else is hit, like the Kerch Bridge, it could also be a bridge in Germany or some other maybe military target or whatever. Now, nobody in Germany who is in their right mind understands what is going on in Merz's mind. The Russian responses to all of that has been extremely harsh. Lavrov and others, Maria Zakharova and others, have said this is a policy from Germany which is absolutely reminding the world of what Germany did 80 years ago, where, after all, in the Second World War, 27 million Russians were killed, largely because of what the Wehrmacht did, and the role of Germany in this war, what the Russians call the Great Patriotic War, is very alive, and it was just made more alive at the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, which took place with big celebrations or commemorations in Moscow. Lavrov and others also said, that this is reminding them exactly of what was done by Germany. It was just a millimeter away from saying, Germany is again like Hitler, stepping away like a tiny millimeter away from such a statement, but evoking that image. Now, I have no idea what is going on in the mind of Merz to not be aware of this. Maybe he is aware. It is inconceivable, because if such a deployment takes place, it makes Germany immediately a war party, a direct war party, in which case, obviously, if Merz counts that then Article 5 of NATO would be evoked, that is a very dubious proposition, given the fact that President Trump may not want to involve the annihilation of the United States in the case of such an adventure, when he is trying at the same time to get a peace settlement with Russia over Ukraine in Istanbul. So what is going on? I have no idea, but I can only say it is extremely dangerous. And, one can expect that the mood of Russia is such that they would, probably evoke a UN Security Council meeting, inform the Council of what their planned actions are, and then deploy an Oreshnik or two to select the target in Germany. And then naturally, the danger that such a military action could enlarge and become wider, eventually lead to a European-wide conflagration which cannot be stopped. This danger is extremely high, and therefore, the mobilization of the international peace coalition is more urgent than ever before. A couple of days ago, I had a dialogue with Professor Ted Postol, one of the world's most eminent experts on nuclear war and nuclear weapons, and you should please watch this dialogue, because Professor Postol warned in the starkest possible terms of what will be the consequences for Germany and the rest of the world if this continues. So I can only say we have to have a mobilization that must stop, and that we have to absolutely move to the alternative, which is the new security and development architecture, which must take into account the security interests of every country on the planet, going in the direction of an indivisible security, because the idea that one nation can have security at the expense of others just is the prelude to World War III. Now, the other major front, I think we will hear from the other speakers more. I can only say that there was, in the recent days, a market shift in even the attitude of all the countries in the West who have been supporting Netanyahu's actions in Gaza until now, practically without any restraint. Even they are now starting to, say what is going on is too far and so forth. It's still too little, too late. And, the danger of the depopulation of Gaza, the killing off of all Palestinians, or making the life for the remaining people so unbearable that they will succeed to get them out of Gaza altogether, that danger is still there. Daily are atrocities, and the killing is continuing practically unabated. So that makes our mobilization to influence the upcoming June meeting for this two-state solution in the United Nations, where we want to inject the economic development perspective with the Oasis plan, that mobilization is more urgent than ever as well. So I want to leave it with these initial remarks, but I can only say that the existence of Germany, I feel, is at stake and threatened like not since 1945.
That's certainly a very stark warning and evaluation, and absolutely appropriate given the gravity of the situation. Thanks, Helga, for those introductory remarks. We next turn to Graham Fuller, former diplomat, former CIA official, and an Islamic scholar to boot, with some comments on the current situation. Graham, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dennis. And I have to lend total support to what Helga said about the dangerousness of the situation in Europe. And just a quick comment, I hadn't been intending to talk about this, but I really wonder what is going on in the minds of European leaders as a whole. It looks like collective insanity. And if you, I sense somehow there's a deeper crisis among Europeans and European leadership as to their very identity. Who is Europe today? Europe essentially has been just the partner, the tail end, small partner of the United States in a Cold War period. But now, after the end of the Cold War, I think Europeans don't know who they are anymore. Are they essentially American wannabes? Do they have their own vision? Where does Europe go as the tail end of a huge Eurasian continent, with the United States warning them that they should not get too close to China, which is obviously one of the leading forces in the world today? So I think Europe has simply got to sit down and decide who they are, what they want, where they're going, and the fact that they have to come to terms with their important, powerful neighbor of Russia. It cannot be held at arm's length forever. This is in Europe's future. So that's about as well as I can do in trying to figure out where Europe is going or struggling to go. I want to turn my attention to a I think a very significant but perhaps not noticed article just the other day in a small publication called The American Conservative, which essentially pointed out, it had escaped my attention, but it pointed out a few important words and phrases that Donald Trump used when he was in Riyadh last week, discussing relations with future relations, economic and strategic relations with other Gulf states. And he made quite specific mention of the fact that he did not see war as being the productive future of anybody when he talked about, he said, it's not my job to look into the hearts and minds of leaders of the world and make decisions about them. That's God's job, he said. So this immediately suggests that he's moving away from a much more ideological position that has been so typical of decades of American policies, which can be basically summarized as being neoconservative. Now, I don't want to get into a deep ideological discussion here, but there are just two things I'd quickly like to point out about why the American Conservative magazine, it's been around a long time, should be criticizing and should be welcoming, I should say, Trump's remarks, which seem now to be moving away from the classic neoconservative view. Basically, what happened, going back to the Russian Revolution, there were two factors in the early Soviet Union. One was Joseph Stalin. The other was Leon Trotsky, who was a Jewish intellectual and a powerful voice. Stalin said the Soviet Union must work for establishing communism firmly in one country. Leon Trotsky said, no, our duty as Soviets is to bring revolution to the entire world. And for that, Stalin kicked him out of the country. Trotsky ultimately ended up in Mexico. And those of you who maybe have seen the quite wonderful film called Frida, about Frida Kahlo, Trotsky went and stayed with Frida Kahlo and her husband, and that was where Trotsky was murdered by Stalin's henchmen in Frida Kahlo's own kitchen. So anyway, this has a long history, but the point is the neoconservative legacy essentially is looking for permanent revolution that is going to change the nature of the entire world. And we've seen hints of that in the permanent war that has infected the United States now ever since at least the end of the Cold War. And if Trump is in the position of repudiating that comment by saying it's not his job to look into the hearts and souls of other leaders of the world, that's God's job, this is a small encouraging straw in the wind. Now, it's very clear that Trump, typically in his own manner, has a very a procedural, a negotiational approach to international politics. It's not based on ideology at all. It's simply fundamentally economic. And I think Trump at this point sees that the Middle East is an extremely important element in the future of the United States in that part of the world. That's one of the reasons why I think he would like to get out from under the war, although so far, I'd have to say Trump has so far produced nothing vis-a-vis a Palestinian peace. Maybe that will come. But Trump's vision essentially is a transactional one in which I might sum it up as a kind of slogan of make business, do business rather than make war. If that is his goal, I think that's admirable. I'm not sure business is the highest goal in the world, but it's certainly better to make business than it is to make war. So this is another interesting turning point, I think, in Trump's mind. I also would like to point out something that Helga has often talked about in the past as well, as to the fact that continuation of pro-war policies in the world is an act of choice by statesmen. There is nothing inevitable about clash of powers, one power with another. John Mearsheimer, who is well known to, I'm sure, all of you, who I have great admiration for as a thinker about the Middle East, about Gaza and Ukraine, a superb analyst. John Mearsheimer somehow has in his own philosophy this idea that because two states are very powerful, like China, like the United States, like Russia, somehow they are destined to clash simply because of their size. I think this is nonsense. I don't agree with it. And I think the very idea that humans do not have agency in making these selections about war, this is a very dangerous concept that I hope the United States and even Trump is beginning to move away from. I would just point out one other thing from Turkish history, which those of you who may or may not follow Turkish history or modern Turkish history, there was Erdogan appointed a foreign minister some 20 years ago named Ahmet Davutoğlu, who was a former academic who came to power, transformed Turkish foreign policy overnight by declaring a new Turkish policy, which would be zero enemies. In other words, he was saying, we're not going to have any more enemies. We're going to simply make sure that all of the bad relations that we had with all of our neighbors be transformed into working relations that are good. Of course, you can't overcome all frictions or hostilities, but it's a statement of position and view of the world that is extremely important. I think Washington was very upset by Davutoğlu because, of course, they wanted Turkey to line up solidly against Russia, against the Soviet Union, against other American enemies in the region, including Syria or Iraq. But this was a new vision that Turkey brought to the region, and I hope it will continue. I think Trump now realizes that the U.S. is in a ever deeper hole strategically in its international situation. It has disgraced itself and blackened its own name by its deep association with the ethnic cleansing policies of Netanyahu. Furthermore, Trump has been engaged in very much a kind of new global South, if you will, in the past. I think that may be changing, but the United States is not admired almost anywhere in the world anymore. That is going to prove extremely costly on the diplomatic front for years to come. Trump himself has said he just does not want to get into wars anymore. So he recognizes, I think, the extreme dangers that the U.S. position has taken, and that has given openings to both Russia and China to move in a more peaceful and economically oriented policies in Africa, in the developing world, with its BRICS policies that are expanding, the countries of BRICS increasingly important. The United States has essentially been left out of this, isolated from all of this. So whether Trump is a serious student of foreign policy or not, is not the point. I think he intuitively grasps that the United States is losing out on these major processes in the world. I'm delighted that he's working on Ukraine. I can't comment where this will all go, but I think this is a uniquely new approach by Trump in being willing to sit down and talk with Putin, talk with Zelenskyy, for that matter, talk with Syria, talk with Iran. This is remarkable. I mean, American presidents have refused to talk to any of those countries for years, including meeting with Putin. How can you be a leader of a great nation refusing to talk with the main countries that matter on the international forum in these days? So I hope Trump is beginning to turn a little bit of a corner on this. I do want to add that I'm not a great fan of Trump in so many other respects, including immigration, student policies, his war on Harvard, et cetera. But in the forum of international politics, I think Trump is breaking quite new ground. And if he is rejecting this neocon ideology of permanent war, permanent change of things, then this is a very major change indeed. There are obviously some problems and difficulties with this. Israel itself is deeply dismayed by Trump's efforts to work more with the Middle East, to work more with the Arab world, and indeed to talk with Iran. So I don't know what the forces of the pro-Israeli lobby in Washington, AIPAC, can be. I'm sure they can place formidable pressure on Donald Trump. And so far as we see now, there has not yet been a major shift in that regard, but one might hope. It indeed raises the question, if one looks at the world and the Middle East from an economic and trade mercantile point of view, one possibly could argue that the Middle East is a much more important geopolitical region than the association with Israel itself. The ties with Israel are essentially ideological and driven by pro-Israeli lobbies. The situation in the Arab world is far more important and driven by far deeper interests and deep economic interests than sheer ideological interests. So anyway, let me leave it at that, but let me say that I am encouraged that we see some straws in the wind that suggest maybe serious change. As we all know with Donald Trump, there's no predicting. He changes good ideas sometimes into bad ideas sometimes into good. But I am heartened by what I can see perhaps a more deeper philosophical understanding, even if he doesn't intellectualize it, a deeper understanding of where the place and role of the United States should be as we move into these dangerous times. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham Fuller. And, on this question that you raised, and Helga did it also earlier, about what in the world is in the head of Merz and other European leaders, you might be interested to know that there's new medical breakthrough. They did an MRI of Merz's head, and they found a big black rock in the middle of it. Maybe that explains some of what was going on. All right, not to make light of an extremely dangerous situation, but a little irony never hurts. All right, our next presentation is going to be a brief 5-minute clip from an extraordinary discussion that Helga Zepp-LaRouche had with Dr. Theodore Postel, MIT professor emeritus, and as she said, one of the foremost experts in the United States and in the world on the question of nuclear warfare. I really urge all of you to watch the whole thing. You will now see a brief 5-minute exchange between Dr. Postel and Helga Zepp-LaRouche.
I think it's about time for people to confront this situation. We are dealing with hallucinating leadership in the West, and they are trying to force decisions, they have not yet succeeded, that could precipitate a global nuclear war that would essentially end civilization and possibly human life on the planet. It's incredible to me that people can talk about Putin the way they talk about him when you look at how restrained and careful he has been. So if I'm not quite as alarmed as you are, hopefully I'm correct, doesn't mean I am, because Putin, as you said earlier, is a man that will not allow himself to be provoked into doing something that will be escalatory and damaging to both Russia's and the world's overall well-being. He will keep his eye on the ball, and he will keep turning the screws in Ukraine as long as nobody kills him. If somebody kills him successfully, I mean, God help us.
Well, I hope that you are right and I'm wrong, but the thing one has to wonder about is, I mean, when after Biden, there are now many people admitting that we were close to World War III towards the end of the Biden administration, and that even in the Pentagon, there was an estimate if these long-range missiles are being delivered to the Ukrainians, that it would mean a 50% chance that it could lead to a nuclear war, and that 50% chance was apparently accepted. Then you have a situation where if Trump and Putin are trying to normalize the relation between the two largest nuclear powers in the world, you would think that every sane person would be happy about it. But what you see instead is that this so-called coalition of the willing, they are trying to prolong the war, to keep the war going for until 29 or even 30 or longer.
Well, they can't prolong the war. There are a couple of armies, Russian armies, that have not yet been involved yet, sitting, waiting for the offensive, waiting for their orders for the offensive that's going to start in weeks or a month or so. I mean, all hell is going to break loose in Ukraine beyond the hell that's already, moving forward in Ukraine. I mean, this place is going to come apart in the next few weeks to months. There's not going to be a war. By the end of the year, I can't imagine that by the end of the year, given the force available to the Russians, that... I agree
with you, and I'm not saying that they will be correct, but you see their intention is that, because they have tied their political career so much to the narrative which is now being acted out, that they don't want to, if they would be realistic, they would say this was all a big failure. The West lost all these wars from Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, now Ukraine. I mean, if they would be rational, they would say maybe to keep these wars is not such a good idea. But there's no sign of such a reflection at all. And, I think what I mentioned in the beginning about the unfortunate shift in Trump's view points to an environment, a global environment, where the forces of the West seem to still want to keep a global dominance in one way or another, and that if not change. I mean, we had just a very successful conference of the Schiller Institute in New Jersey, and there the aim was that if we don't succeed to overcome geopolitics and replace this idea that one nation or group of nations has to suppress another group or be dominant over another group, with the idea that we have to move to the one humanity who have common aims. I mean, Dr. Teller used to talk about the common aims of mankind, and I think that idea of, that we are the one humanity eventually should replace this idea of squabbling interests and ideological controversies
So that's just a small taste of the full discussion. Let me just emphasize one point there, that what Dr. Postel said at the very beginning: if they succeed in assassinating Putin, heaven help us. Now, that's not a hypothetical. As Helga mentioned a few moments ago, according to the Russian government, according to Foreign Minister Lavrov, there was an actual attempt to hit Putin's helicopter as he was flying to Kursk. Few details are known about this, but the Russian government is saying that this was in fact the case. Now, a number of weeks ago, we warned, right at the time that Tulsi Gabbard said that ex-FBI Director James Comey had called for the assassination of President Trump, that this was a live attempt to kill Trump. We warned that this was just the tip of the iceberg, that there were assassination plans against Trump, against Putin. And now we see, in addition to that, just to put this on our radar screen, attempts or warnings to assassinate the lead Russian negotiator, Medinsky, in the Ukrainian negotiations, with threats coming from Mirotvorets and the CCD. Mirotvorets is the hit squad that is responsible and claims credit for, de facto, various assassinations. They had him, Medinsky, on their website since 2019, and they updated it in May 19th of this year. This is a very live operation, pardon the mixed metaphors there. Then you had these, the strategy of tension being deployed. Sometimes the explanation for terrorism of this sort is not in the events themselves, but the broader strategy of tension. What happened with the murders in Madrid, or the blind assassinations in Washington, D.C., absolutely horrific type of development, or in Mexico City, and so on and so forth. So these, I think, need to be kept in mind, as Dr. Postel was indicating. So we are now going to turn to a couple of reports, among others, about the conference that was just held by the Schiller Institute. The first of those will come from Daniel Burke, a leading organizer, a leader of the LaRouche Youth Movement, and he's going to give us an update on that process. Daniel?
Thank you very much, Dennis. Yes, the second day of the conference that we hosted in New Jersey this past weekend, it began with this extremely inspiring and exciting series of mostly never before seen videos of Lyndon LaRouche speaking. And what was just wonderfully exciting about this was that he made extremely clear how he approached the development of leadership, and in particular, youth leadership for humanity today in the throes of crisis that we're in. At one point, he said that the key that he was trying to communicate to younger people, 25 years and under, at that time, this was from about 20 years ago, is the sense of immortality. The sense of a mission that lives on after you die, and the way that you participate in the creation of changes for society to bring human behavior into correlation with the nature of the universe, with the natural law that governs the processes that we encounter in this universe. So that was a tremendous opportunity for the young people who were there to hear from a modern Socrates in Lyndon LaRouche, seeking for them to develop that internal capability of agapic action and of creativity, to develop their human creativity. At the conference, we had between over 35 people who were younger, who many of them students. We had aerospace students, we had young world-class musicians from the Netherlands, from China. We had students in particle physics at leading universities. We had students from Bangladesh, from Mauritania, from young people from Palestine and Russia, some of them immigrants, some of them studying here in the United States, and many other locations. And of course, we were hooked up to people all across the world, including a significant organization of young people in Ibero-America. as well as we had a class of young people watching a group of young people watching in Spain. So I think the list goes on, including Equatorial Guinea. We had a wonderful participation in our first strategic panel of the conference by a group of young people in Equatorial Guinea in Africa. So this was a rich gathering of young people who are looking to the next 50 years, Earth's next 50 years, and what it is that we can do about it to shape a period of an age of reason. So to that, I was very happy to be the moderator of a panel, the 5th panel of our conference. You can find it on YouTube, and I really encourage everyone to watch it, because what you'll find is there are about 8 presentations from our younger members and some of our very young participants in our movement, members of our movement, leaders in our movement, on crucial questions that LaRouche introduced to us as a way of breaking through the kind of cultural collapse that we face today as we're trying to figure out how to organize out of this mess. We had presentations on the fraud of sense certainty, as from the standpoint of Plato's cave, and what is the means by which to actually apprehend a universal principle, and how is it that there's a distinction between seeking unto a universal principle and merely developing a model, a statistical model, as in the case of Kepler. We had discussions of classical culture and the crucial conceptions within Schiller and Shakespeare's dramas that actually give us insight into the sublime character required of leadership today. And we had just reflections on Martin Luther King and his mission, as well as that of Edgar Poe, the American poet, and and the essential question of how is it that ideas live on? What is it? How do you involve yourself in the ideas that live on? So this is, in addition, our wonderful organizer, my colleague and friend Carolina Dominguez in Mexico, gave a presentation on the question of Vladimir Vernadsky and his significance in looking at the changes that we need over the next 50 years, the Russian biogeochemist. So, I mean, this was really a matter of a culmination of a year's work of collaboration and development as part of our intensive effort to bring people into a political action in the universe that is based on the conception that the mind, the human mind, and the creative potential of the individual human mind is our power. It's the power that we have to transform this world and to bring about what's urgently needed, which is this new international security and development architecture. So I think we're at an inflection point. We're seeking to catalyze the changes that we need, and many young people were in that room and who are watching over Zoom have now been confronted with some very challenging, very beautiful ideas about the nature of man. And so I invite you, everyone who's watching, to get all the young people that you know to watch this and to watch it yourself, panel 5 of the conference on our YouTube channel, and then to challenge our young people across the world to take responsibility for this. In the next period ahead, we will certainly have another International Youth Dialogue, which is a meeting that we regularly hold, in which we have people from all across the world in dialogue with Helga LaRouche and in dialogue with the ideas of the Schiller Institute. And this is a vehicle for us to get together students and youth at significant institutions, educational institutions across the world, but everyone who has the ability to speak up, bring them together. We will have a dialogue at the highest level, and we will establish joint initiatives to cause the change that we need in the world. So that's what I have to share with you today.
Thanks, Daniel. And let me just add to that this same process will continue in an upcoming International Schiller Institute conference to be held in Germany in the mid-July period, which will again also focus on this question of youth recruitment. As for those of you who are hesitant about whether you should or shouldn't watch that panel, which Daniel was just recommending, I have it on good authority that if you watch it, it knocks 5 years off your age. So unless you're a teenager, in which case it adds 5 years. So whatever you want. Okay, thanks. Now, the last presenter on this part of the discussion, regulars are aware that at about noon, we will go over into the second half of the discussion, which is the back and forth, the question and answer period of this meeting. But to conclude this part of the discussion, we have Jose Vega from the LaRouche Youth Movement, congressional candidate from the Bronx. And I believe, among other things, he has a report on the extraordinary presentation at the United Nations given by the Palestinian-American Dr. Feroz Sidwa, who is again in Gaza trying to do something to stop the horror and the genocide. So, Jose, go right ahead. Are you there, Jose? Okay, maybe he's on a phone call. It tends to happen. All right, if Jose is tied up for the moment, then I think what we're going to want to do here is to transition to the discussion period. For that and before that, let me encourage people who are watching this on YouTube, in any other form of the streaming versions of this, if you want to actually participate in the discussion, you need to log on to the Zoom link for this. You can do that at the Schiller Institute site. So log on to the schillerinstitute.org site and you can get the connection for this Zoom meeting. So what we will do now is stop the recorded portion of this meeting and proceed with the open Q&A of those who are connected to